As some of the most important carbon sinks on the planet, wetlands play an essential role in mitigating climate change. They do this by sequestering carbon through photosynthesis and storing it in the form of plant biomass, sediments, and soil. Soil accumulation is particularly important as most wetland soil provides anaerobic conditions that inhibit the decomposition of organic matter, allowing carbon to stay stored in the soil for up to thousands of years. Peatland, for example, covers 3% of the world's surface but stores about 30% of all land-based carbon. The destruction of peatlands accounts for 10% of annual CO2 emission, underscoring the importance of protecting this type of ecosystem as a strategy for mitigating climate change. The protection and restoration of wetlands is also an effective mitigation and adaptation approach for some of the impact of climate change. Inland wetlands can soak up water during rainy periods and release it gradually during drier periods, reducing the risk of floods and delaying the onset of droughts. Similarly, coastal wetlands can absorb the shock of tides and storms in coastal areas, protecting the coast from the effects of sea level rise and tsunamis. Protecting wetlands can also help reduce biodiversity loss. Wetlands can act as a refuge for sensitive freshwater species, mitigating the effects of extreme changes in temperature and precipitation. Wetland vegetation can lower the water temperature, allowing aquatic species to survive while the water gets warmer and giving them more time to adapt to new conditions of their environment. Furthermore, wetlands are essential sites for bird migration and reproduction. The number of wetlands in Chile is almost 40,000. Including from the highland wetlands in the north to the Magallanes peatland in the south, only 14 of which are recognized under the international protection category called Ramsar. All the remaining wetlands are exposed to the threats of pollution, the impact of development projects in the area, climate change, among others. Last year, on January 23rd, the Urban Wetland Law was published, which seeks to grant a certain level of protection to wetlands that are within urban limits. In this context, environmental organizations are seeking alliances with city council or government authorities to promote the protection of wetlands on their territories that hold a high value to the communities and species that depend on those ecosystems. Rocío González, Executive Director of Futaleufú Riverkeeper, will briefly tell us about the efforts her organization is developing, supported by Ñenco Foundation, to protect the urban wetland of Futaleufú.
We are at Laguna Espejo in Futaleufú, Chilean Patagonia. Laguna Espejo is a body of water closer for people in town. It has a very high historical and cultural importance. Is the home for different species of birds, amphibians, and fish. And as you can see, it has a very high scenic value, which makes it one of the main touristic attractions for visitors. What we're doing right now is gathering information to submit an application to the Ministry of Environment and declare this Laguna Espejo as an urban protected wetland. The main threats that Laguna Espejo is facing right now are related to littering, to the presence of invasive species, and the growth of population and urban development. Futaleufú Riverkeeper has been doing several cleanups and educational workshops to highlight the value of Laguna Espejo. Right now, with this Chilean law, we have a great opportunity to declare Laguna Espejo as an urban protected wetland and move forward the protection and conservation of our natural heritage.
At the Center for Biodiversity and Restoration at Victoria University of Wellington, students and scientists are using a blend of ecological and social research to improve outcomes for wetland restoration in a collaboration called Wetlands for People and Place.
Wetlands are one of the most most threatened ecosystems worldwide, especially in New Zealand. I think within the Wellington region there's something like 1% of the wetland that used to be here left. For my project, I'm looking at, the technical term is conservation or restoration genetics of swamp mairi, which is a native tree. What this really means is that I'm trying to look at the genetic diversity of the species across New Zealand. I'm hoping to be able to model how best to restore genetic diversity of trees and of plants in a landscape, so that we can actually model this through the use of tools such as Lucy, and then enable us to make plans and put these in place before having to sit on the ground and essentially plant trees but find out that we've made the wrong decisions 10 years later.
To help identify these key areas, the research utilizes a globally renowned mapping technology called Lucy, developed right here at Victoria University.
Lucy is the Land Utilization and Capability Indicator Framework. It is a decision support tool that takes information about topography and land cover, soil, climate, things like that. And then it looks at these things and tries to understand where you have what we call ecosystem services, things like flood mitigation, carbon sequestration, or where you might have things like erosion, where you might need to put management interventions. So what Lucy can do is that it looks through the landscape and tries to figure out, okay, where might wetlands be, or where might you put potential wetlands for things like restoration, to enhance flood mitigation, or to enhance nutrient trapping, that kind of thing. That's also really good for finding where wetlands might have been historically, so where conditions of the soil or the land now might have been suitable for wetlands before any land use change occurred to it. And that's really important for future restoration or for monitoring existing wetlands. So the really cool thing about models like Lucy and climate models in general is that we can sort of look towards the future and make guesses or estimates of what things might be given certain conditions. So even though Lucy takes in climate data that's historical, like what's happening now, you can easily feed in climate data that's, like 10% increase in dryness or 10% increase in precipitation, and then see what happens in the landscape at that point. And maybe that'll help you figure out, all right, this area is going to be flooded, I need to do something about that. This area might lose its carbon sequestration, I got to do something about that.
Restoration increases the wetland's ability to store carbon and to be able to abate floods. Biodiversity is significantly higher in restored wetlands, as you might expect. Wetlands are very integrated, often with waterways, and waterways are always changing courses and going different places, and so wetland restoration will have its challenges as far as fencing off wetlands and riparian areas, and when the watercourse changes, we'll have to adjust that.
Genetic diversity is very important because it allows trees and plants and animals, life in general, to adapt to things like climate change, to new diseases, and without it, we're looking at a situation where these trees will probably just go extinct.